bring her down, thank you. You know, one of the biggest obstacles we've had in pushing stand your ground and castle doctrine is that most of the legislators believe that our current system is fine the way that it is. And they keep asking us, well, show us where it's a problem in Idaho, show us where it's a problem. Well, number one, I don't want it to become a problem. I don't want somebody to be the first one to go through it. That's what we kept telling them. And then LeAnn reached out to Alexandria and said, you know, gave a brief story, and Alexandria called me and said, Greg, we might have that golden case we've been talking about, because there's other cases where stand your ground has been thrown out, but the guy that was trying to use stand your ground was some dirtbag, and with his own rap sheet, he still should have had stand your ground, but they throwed it out, and it was like, I really didn't want to defend this guy, but so then we found LeAnn and her story, or she found us, and it's what happened to her and her family could happen to any gun owner, and that's why getting these laws passed are so crucial, especially when we were talking about this morning. Oregon and Washington, California, and others, they're going purple. They're blue now. Idaho is going to be purple in the near future. There's no stopping it. That's the reality. We all say move back. Don't come here from California. That's going to happen, folks. There's no stopping it. So we've got to get our laws as strong as we can now before that happens. So anyway, with that, I guess probably just start from the night when the banging on the door went, and then we'll go from there. So.
Well, first, does anybody have any more questions? Because I feel more comfortable with those than telling it.
I have a question. What happened?
What's that?
Sure.
We're gonna Facebook Live this.
Oh, holy crap. Okay, give me a minute.
What room are we in right now?
You're with friends.
Christy's secret room. I don't know.
No, it's just
It's a conference.
the
LeAnn, are
Yes.
you okay with that?
Yeah, I'll be okay.
Don't feel pressured.
I'll be okay.
This is you, this is your family. Okay.
So I'll give you the really condensed version. We just had Thanksgiving dinner, and I'd done the dishes and stuff. We were putting the boys down to bed. I homeschool, so I'm one of those people that I don't really have super strict rules because we more unschool, I guess. And so the boys weren't quite asleep by 11. Wyatt was, but Gabe wasn't. And which I have two boys. At the time they were 6 and Wyatt was 14 months old. He was still nursing. And we hear somebody not knocking, banging on our front door. And so we go, and it's a man inquiring for my husband. We didn't know him. We had never seen him before, and we could smell his alcohol through the front door. And so we opened it, and James was in front of me, and he opened it, said hi, what can I do for you? He went out into our mudroom to see if he can handle the problem, because James is really good at diffusing issues. And from that point on, I went to check on the boys, and what I didn't know was they actually took James out of the mudroom into our driveway. And the prosecutor, sorry, I'm derailing for a minute. He actually said that I felt so comfortable that I went back into my room to check on the boys and to read for a minute. And he's right, I did, because I trusted my husband. But I felt like I needed to go check on him, and when I did, I stuck my head out the door, and I heard them say that they had a gun and they were going to jack him up. And at that point, I ran back to the bedroom, and I told Gabe, I said, no matter what you hear, no matter what, you stay in this room and you protect Wyatt. And so I went back outside and I said, hey, do I need to call the cops? And what I saw was that they had James pinned up against their truck and they were strangling him. And that's when, and there was 2 men that night, I forgot to include that, I apologize. That's what we learned. There was just one that knocked on the door, and then another one came up after he was outside. And at that point, the one that was the original person at the door turned around and started confronting me. James went back inside, and he tried to get me back inside, but this man was so loud and in my face that I didn't even notice. And the other one followed him inside, and that's when he got his gun. And he told him to leave our home. And he did, and he came back outside with a gun to get me, to protect me, because this man, it didn't matter what I said, it didn't matter what I did, it didn't matter if I complied with the question, if I answered the affirmative, it didn't matter what I did, he was not de-escalating. And James pushed me behind him, held the gun up, and shot him. That night, James was arrested. They questioned him within 12 hours of this happening. They don't question policemen that shoot people that early. They wait 24 to 48 hours before that happens. They told me that night that they were charging him with first-degree murder. We didn't know anything, and this is why it's so important to educate yourself. We didn't know anything. We talked to the police because we thought, oh, the police are here and they can help us, even though the men told us that night that the police were the ones who sent them there. We thought, oh, the police are here and they'll help us, but they did. They were kind, the regular policemen did, but the detective on the case, his job isn't necessarily to find the truth, it's to build a case. And everything we said, even though our stories, my story was the same, they just twisted everything to make a case. And I forgot to include that night they told us that they had been watching us, that they had watched me nurse our baby, that they had been there earlier that day while I was cooking. And so from that point on, things just went downhill. I mean, it already went downhill, but it went downhill. The cops left at 4 in the morning. By 8 o'clock, I had eviction papers. We had to move. And then, James got convicted of second-degree murder. In spite of tons and tons of errors and evidence not collected.
Yeah, why don't we talk a little bit now?
Thank you.
One thing I did want to mention, and I know this is hard. I'm trying to help her feel some of the stuff that I know she's told me, and in her mind, she's reliving this entire thing right now. When James, and I've talked to James from prison for at length now, and she came out and heard them say, "We have a gun and we're going to jack you up." What she didn't hear, and from his point, was that they told him as they were strangling and choking him, "We're going to kill your wife, kill your kids, and make you watch." In the entire process, okay? He actually had choke marks on your neck, which we found out from Alexander yesterday. In order for, when somebody's strangling you, in order for there to be marks, they really have to be strangling you. And now when she says a whole bunch of stuff that happened after, guys, this was really bad. The brother who was alive, they didn't take his blood alcohol content at the scene. They did not take his clothing at the scene, because from James's point of view, he said what happened was he was pointing the gun at the guy who is now deceased, and Ian, his brother, came over and got in between them as James had pushed her back behind, trying to get her out of the way. Ian came in, his fingers on the trigger. Ian bumps his arm, and the firearm goes off, and that's what James believes happened. But you have to understand that when you shoot somebody, especially in the aftermath, as she was mentioning, I mean, you're gone, right? And in your mind, you're like, holy crap, I just killed somebody. 5 minutes ago, I'm sitting here with my family. Now this guy's dead in my driveway. Should have never happened. Ian, the brother, fled the scene, and stopped at his truck to grab his gloves, and then took off towards another house to go. What was he calling the cops or whatever?
No, he just took off.
He just took off, and they didn't canvass for a gun. There was no gun found. They didn't canvass for a gun. Okay. And then we get into his defense attorney. Get this, his defense attorney had represented both of the brothers before he represented her husband. Huge conflict of interest. And to make it worse, on the scene yesterday, we were reading through the transcripts, the brother who's on the stand, I don't remember what Isabella was saying, I'm almost ready to go, and Ian's on the stand, and he goes, "Oh, whenever you're ready, Izzy." Total first name base, a nickname basis on the stand. It's just, I mean, everybody in that town just seemed to be really out to
Fry us.
Yeah, to fry you for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, and the prosecutor went to great lengths to impeach me, which he succeeded in doing, because he said that I didn't feel threatened, even though I told him that I personally didn't feel threatened. I felt like James was threatened. And so, you know, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about, how can I save this person that I love? How can I stop this from happening to them? And I mean, I guess it's a stupid thing to do at the time, but you don't think about that. You think about, what can I do to make them not hurt my husband? And then also there was a jailer who took the pictures of James's throat. Okay, this is my interpretation of it. When I saw the pictures, you remember the end of Braveheart when they put the ropes around his neck and then you can see those marks? That's what James's neck looked like. And the jailer took the pictures and testified, and then the detective on the case came back and said, well, you know, they have technology now that can enhance that, like
They were accusing the
Photoshop.
police
Using
of
a filter.
photoshopping,
Yeah.
essentially,
Using a filter to make
the evidence.
Yeah. And he said that he didn't see those marks on James, but the first time that he interviewed James, within like a couple of hours of this happening, he was in the dark. Even though James was telling them, my throat hurts, my throat hurts, my throat hurts. And so, I mean, and Eli, the man who died, his blood alcohol level at autopsy was 0.18. And blood alcohol level goes down as your body is decomposing and stuff. And Ian, the other brother, said that he was drunker than his brother was. And yet they believed his testimony over mine, and I don't drink. Also,
He had THC in his
Yeah.
body and
Two other
tramadol
drugs.
or something like that.
Yep.
Some other
Eli had
drugs
3
involved.
drugs in his body at the time. And both of them had extensive criminal records before this happened. None of those were brought up in court because they were the victims.
Tell the story about Eli. Was it him and his girlfriend? Yeah. Or what, ex-girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
whatever he was dating.
Well, 3 months before this happened, Eli beat his girlfriend so much that she was still in the ICU when he came to our home. And none of that was admissible. I've had people come to me and tell me that if he intended to kill us, then he meant that he was going to kill us. I've had people come and tell me that they were shocked this has happened to him, but they were shocked that it came from my husband, that it happened to my husband. And here's another thing. When you're facing something like this, you feel so powerless because attorneys are excruciatingly expensive. And we lived in a travel trailer. I mean, we lived in a trailer park, for crying out loud. It was nice and it wasn't run down and it was well taken care of. But we're just common everyday people. And James was a logger. And I stayed at home and took care of our babies. And we didn't have $10,000 just for a retaining fee. We didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on this. And so when you think about this happening to you in your world and in your life, you think, oh, it's okay. The good is going to come out. Somebody's going to come forward and they're going to fight for us and it's going to be okay. And I reached out to everybody that I could think of. I was desperate for it. I told it to everybody that I met, to the point to where it became who I was. And everybody would say, shake their head and, man, that's just too bad. It was too bad. And it can happen to any one of you. And you never think that it will, but it does. And when it does happen, what's the laws that are in place right now don't protect you. They don't keep you safe. And it's really important that this law gets passed because it will keep you safe, at least safer, from having to go through somebody coming and threatening your lives to having to go through the prosecution process. It's atrocious.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, let me throw in a couple other things here real quick, and get into some questions, and we'll kind of close it up. But you got it on the floor here soon.
I need to go to the Secretary
Yeah.
of State's office.
Her attorney came to. How long was this after that she came to and said that some of the jurors, she had sworn affidavits from some of the jurors that they essentially felt coerced into finding her husband guilty.
Oh, it was maybe a month,
It was pretty soon.
like maybe a month or two
Yeah.
after James was convicted.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
And she asked for those documents, and she's like, they're destroyed. I destroyed them, so those were gone.
well, it was odd. Why tell me in the first place if you're gonna destroy the documents? One man said he didn't convict James on what he did, but what he didn't do. Because he didn't fire a warning shot. So this bill will prevent prosecutors from being able to say, hey, you shot this person, but you could have done this, you could have done this, you could have done that, and put doubt in the juror's head. To say, well, he had other options. Well, no, you don't always have other options, and the option that seems the most available to you, and in my opinion, is the right one if it means you're keeping your family safe.
I think that's how we all feel. I don't think any of us, like I told James, I said, I don't think I would have done anything different other than late at night, I usually answer the door with a gun. So I'm ready to go right then, but, yeah, the more we've read into the transcripts and the more we hear about this story, I'm just flabbergasted that her husband is in jail, in prison. No way, shouldn't happen to anybody. So let me kind of just briefly mention the bills real quick, and then we'll open it up to questions. We met with Alexandra yesterday, we shot some videos, I think she already got that first short one up on YouTube. But the bottom line is, we looked at both bills again. I said, show me in 444 what would have happened to her husband had 444 been in law back in 2007 and 8 and before. And she said, well, right here is a paragraph that prohibits the police from even detaining you and arresting you unless they have probable cause. But they didn't care at the time. They were just like, there's a dead guy, somebody's got to go to jail for it, right? I mean, that was probably the mentality. That's just my opinion. And then we had the criminal immunity that is in 444, that if they still decided to take him to court and he was found not guilty, then there's some restitution for their family. Like she said, they're just common people. They don't have the ability to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a good attorney. Had they had the ability to do that, they would. I mean, this defense lawyer for her didn't object to anything. The prosecutor had free reign pretty much the entire case to say whatever he wanted. She had no idea what she was doing. So then we looked at 1313, and I said, honest assessment, would 1313 have made a difference? And she went through and just said no. They would have been able to arrest him. They would have been able to take him to court. They would have been able to backdoor that evidence in and said, well, you should have grabbed your cell phone, which I believe they actually said in the court. You should have grabbed your cell phone instead of a gun. You should have done this instead of this. 1313 will not prohibit them from entering in that backdoor evidence that you should have done something differently. And so at the end of the day, that's why we gotta fight for this, and that's why she came to us. She knows we can't give her those 10 years back, 9.5 years back, with her family and her kids and her husband and everything, but she wants to make sure that nobody else has to go through what they have gone through again, and that's what they're trying to silence right now. That's why they didn't want her to testify, is because they knew we would exploit this really bad hole in our system. So with that, you have a question, Anthony?
Yeah, it may have been answered, but I think it's relevant for people who are defending their homes to understand. How did prosecutors argue around the fact that two intoxicated men articulated grave bodily injury or death? They articulated that threat to your husband.
Oh, they dismissed it.
Was it ever even entered? Like, did jurors hear that they articulated that
Oh, yeah.
threat?
They heard it from me. But James never got the chance to testify.
Oh, that was the other thing, yeah, I forgot to mention. His defense attorney said you were not allowed to go up and testify. You did not get to defend, and that's why he was.
What was the reason given?
She didn't give
She
one.
didn't give him one, but he has been resentenced in 2012, 2011?
No, I thought it
13?
was, no.
I
Maybe
don't
it was
remember.
2012 maybe.
Yeah, I think it was
So,
2012. He was resentenced because the judge said, you got screwed. Your defense attorney should have done X, Y, and Z, and she didn't do that, and so he got his sentence cut down. And we believe that at some point in that resentencing, or James said he thought it was out in the hallway that was said, but one of the judges said if this was ever retried, there's no way this man would be in prison. Because there's no evidence to,
I'm working on getting the audio.
Yeah,
What's his current sentence right now?
7 and 7.
yeah, so he gets out next year, correct?
Yeah, well, he's already served the 7 determinant. He went before the parole board, and they told him that he wasn't eligible for release until 3 years out. So they're making him serve the original sentence of 10. So he got 10 and 10 originally, and now he's got 7 and 7. Yeah, and that whole thing. My pastor went with me, and he was so mad. He like turned red and was like, because they totally dismissed like anything that he said or we said. We have a support system. I have a place for us to live. He's had a long-standing job with his company that he worked with before he went away, and he can't move back to the top 4 counties of Idaho. So we have to move. So, good times.
Anybody else have any questions for LeAnn? You're all stunned, right? Because yeah, that was me.
What do you say?
When they were banging on the door and they asked for your husband, did they ask for him by name?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
And then articulated a threat,
Mhm.
great bodily injury.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is the prosecution misquoted Idaho law even in the courts, and it's all in the transcripts. Basically said, oh well, if they really weren't like physically just beating the crap out of you, then the threat to justifiable homicide is not there. Completely misquoted the actual statute, even the old statute.
No, and this is what else he
which
said that
doesn't
was
say
funny. He said you have to know the character of the person before you decide that it's
Yeah.
lethal force that's needed. Okay, hello, you're strangling my husband. That's kind of indicative of what their character
They have all the
was.
resources and they have the power to dictate how the story's told,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and they can do whatever they want, and we don't have unlimited resources
That's very true.
to fight.
Yeah, one of the things Alexandria did bring up yesterday is that, there's the mantra, don't talk to the police, don't say a word. She says that you don't want to not say anything because that looks really bad. You say as little as possible. Say, I'm willing to cooperate. I felt threatened. I felt my life was in jeopardy. And you just kind of leave it at that, but I'd like to have my attorney present when I talk because James just put himself in a bad situation. He was on the phone with dispatch right after, talking to people right after, and his head's in a cloud, right? And so they used some of his statements that had kind of shifted based on what he, at one point they said, well, we thought you did it on purpose, which either way, to me, whether he shot the guy, in self-defense or whether it went off negligently because he got bumped, it didn't matter to me. But the police kind of used that, and the prosecution used that to twist it around and say, look, you don't know what you did. You went back in there to murder him on purpose. I mean, it's
Well,
just.
and then Greg, the thing of it is unless you're like a trained sniper or you've been in conflict in battle or something like that, if you've just taken another life,
Yeah.
no matter what it is, you're gonna be in shock.
That's what he
You're
was.
to stand there and have to gather your thoughts and know exactly what happened at that moment. I don't see, unless you're trained, how you would know, how you could think it through, how you could know.
You can't train anybody
Yeah. You have
to not be
experience
messed
what's
up
gonna happen.
after they've taken a life. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
You have to
And
go,
that's
you have to go through the
military people
experience. Yeah.
and
Good
even
point,
military
good
people.
point.
When I was in
After they
Iraq,
figure it out,
yeah, when I was in Iraq,
You're a mess.
I saw guys that they would kill somebody and just be in total shock, like
Yeah.
James was.
you
Like,
go into a mess.
he's just talking, but he
Yeah.
doesn't realize that he's talking. And then I've seen guys that they freak out and they start crying and sobbing and they just go through a range of emotions and they kind of get used to it, when you're in war because it's happening. But that's not normal, no, that's not normal to want to kill anybody, even if they're threatening you. Nobody wants to have to take another human life.
To that point, I personally interviewed one of the deputies that shot Jack Ness. And their thing was, there's 200 chemicals that inject into your brain the moment something like that happens. He said, I wasn't allowed to talk to my partner, but I don't remember exactly the amount of time, but it was a lot longer than 12 hours before they sat down and said, okay, what happened? The police
Well,
were.
your parasympathetic nervous system will kick in full.
Well, and that's what his last attorney argued, is that he was held to a higher standard, a different standard than even law enforcement's held to. And that wasn't right, because they interviewed him in such a short amount of time, whenever police officers and law enforcement wait 24 to 48 hours before they're interviewed when they shoot someone.
Somebody comes
And then
and
he
pats
doesn't
him on the
mind.
shoulder and,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
he sits in jail for 12 hours before he's interviewed.
Two questions here. First question, is there no can you not afford an appeal, or is there just no appeal allowed? Seems like.
Well, with this last bit, James, was putting forth I wanna say it was post-conviction relief, and it got kicked back down to the court that it was sentenced in. But the prosecutor looked at it and said, oh, okay, and that's where we got the 7 and 7, but part of that deal was James had to put in an Alfred plea. And James thought he would get home sooner that way. And, I think one of the stipulations also was that he could not, I'm not positive.
You keep going, I'll talk first.
But I'm not sure that he couldn't pursue any more, like, legalities of that, cause, you know, it protects the prosecutor's butt.
And second question then, so the prosecutor told the jury without a warning shot, this was the reason they needed to convict him.
Basically, yeah.
Warning shots are a felony in the state of Idaho.
Mhm.
So he was telling the jury the reason why your husband had to be convicted of a felony was because he didn't commit a felony.
Basically, yeah.
I hope everybody understands where that's coming from.
Either way, he was gonna get screwed.
But that right there should just shoot the whole thing down.
Should, but, it just didn't happen that way.
I'm sorry for you.
I appreciate that.
I think we're all sorry this happened, and you know, they asked us in the committee, show us a case. Well, legislature, this is the case.
And it's even worse than we thought. I mean, I still have no words most of the time. I don't even know how to tell people what happened. It's not only, should he not have gone to jail based on just simple self-defense, but then all of the stuff that happened after, to where this entire community was essentially on these dirtbag side. These two violent thugs that attacked her family were stalking them and doing all sorts of creepy stuff. I mean, they're all defending these guys. It's like
Well-
straight out of like a really bad movie.
Well, and Ian, the brother, he hasn't stopped.
Yeah,
He's
gotten
still-
even more.
He's still, gotten more. A couple of years ago, he had 4 felony misconducts with a minor dropped for no reason. He was supposed to not get out of Cottonwood till 2019, at least that's what it said in the repository. And he was just arrested, last month for a controlled substance. And it just keeps, like, he just keeps doing it. Almost a year to the day after this happened to us, he did almost the exact same thing to his ex-girlfriend.
And he was the key, the prosecution, I mean, that was it. It was Ian's word versus James and versus hers. This violent, dirtbag thug that had a long rap sheet. I looked at the rap sheet, it was long, really long. And he was painted as this, and even the deceased, Eli, was painted as these wonderful, upstanding citizens of the community. It's just, you have anything else you wanna say, or?
And they're not related to anybody in the government or in the.
I honestly don't know. For the longest time, I just duck and cover. I mean, it took me years to be able to stand in front of an open window.
Sure.
And for a really, really, really long time, I was just, so I haven't researched anything because I don't want them to notice me
Yeah.
because we still live in the same town. Like the other night after he contacted me, it was so stupid. I work at my church and I usually work alone with me and my boys. And there was a car parked outside that I didn't know. And before I got in the car, I told the boys, I said, get out of the car and get back before I start the car. Because in my head, I'm thinking, there's a bomb on my car. Like, this is still what wrecks my head.
Yeah.
And the boys are like, Mom, are you okay? And I'm like, just get back. Because I want healing for them. But I don't want it at the expense of my children. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So, and like my son, my oldest son, he's decided to go to public school on his own. And I was freaking out because I can't protect him. I can't keep him safe. And he recently ran into someone who was related to the family. And I was so proud of him, bless you. Because he talked to the guy. I went to the counselor and they had a meeting. And he looked at him and he said, dude, this happened 10 years ago when I was 6 years old. I don't have anything to do with it, and you don't either. I would really like us to have peace. And the other kid's like, me too. And I was like, school my kid, you know? But, you know, I want them to see the reality and admit the reality of what their sons are or were. But I also want them to realize that I hold no ill will towards them, that I want healing, and I want to be able to exist in the same community together, because, you know, I really believe that forgiveness on both parts is imperative to that. And I don't want to leave my hometown. I love living there.
I'm sorry, I missed some. I was up in
Sandpoint.
right around Sandpoint.
Mhm.
So, and I'm just gonna throw this out there. I mean, as you're there, and if things start to get real scary, or you really are nervous about certain things, please reach out to us. We have people all over the state,
There's some
and
good people up in that neck of the woods.
we do that kind of thing. So just know that we have people near you, and you can reach out and find me in any way.
That really means so much to me. Thank you.
Just make a phone call. There's a lot of people up in
Reach out many times.
Good people.
We are good buddies here.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
All
Sorry,
right.
I didn't make you cry.
No, it's okay. I've been holding it back all morning, so you're good.
Well, first, big round of applause for LeAnn. Thank you for